We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Hundreds of rescuers used shovels and their bare hands to shift through a massive landslide, with dozens feared dead in the region worst hit by Typhoon Mangkhut as the storm's toll climbed to 74.
Syria accidentally downed a Russian military aircraft with 15 people on board when its air defenses went into action against an Israeli missile strike, the Russian army says.
China vows to retaliate against the United States and warns of uncertainty in trade talks after President Trump targets another $200 billion in Chinese imports with tariffs starting next week.
And South Korea's president and the North's Kim Jong-un drive through the streets of Pyongyang together, past cheering citizens ahead of a summit aimed at rebooting stalled denuclearization talks with the U.S.
Wherever you're watching from around the world, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm Alma Angeles.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. South Korean President Moon Jae-in arrived in Pyongyang Tuesday for his third summit this year, with Kim Jong-un as he seeks to reboot stalled denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States. Kim welcomed his visitor at Pyongyang's International Airport. The two men embracing after Moon walked down the steps of his aircraft. Accompanied by their wives, they exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes ahead of a military welcome ceremony as hundreds of people lining the tarmac cheered, waving North Korean flags and Unification One showing an undivided peninsula. Moon, whose own parents fled the north during the three-year conflict, is on a three-day trip following in the footsteps of his predecessors Kim Dae-jung in 2000 and mentor Roh Moo-hyun in 2007. The first visit by a South Korean leader to Pyongyang in a decade is also the men's third meeting this year, after two previous summits in April and May in the demilitarized zone that divides the peninsula. Moon has been instrumental in brokering the diplomatic thaw that saw a historic summit between Kim and U.S. President Trump in Singapore in June, where Kim backed denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. But no details were agreed, and Washington and Pyongyang have sparred since over what that means and how it will be achieved. The U.S. is pressing for the North's final, fully verified denuclearization, while Pyongyang wants a formal declaration that the 1950-53 Korean War is over and has condemned gangster-like demands for it to give up its weapons unilaterally.
Myanmar's powerful army should be removed from politics, UN investigators said Tuesday, in the final version of a damning report reiterating calls for top generals to be prosecuted for genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority. A brutal military crackdown last year forced more than 700,000 Rohingya to flee over the border to Bangladesh. Demands have mounted for those who waged the campaign to face justice. The UN's 444-page probe is the most meticulous breakdown of the violence to date. The UN's analysis, based on 18 months' work and more than 850 in-depth interviews, urges the international community to investigate the military top brass for genocide, including Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing. Myanmar's army has denied nearly all wrongdoing, insisting its campaign was justified to root out Rohingya insurgents who staged deadly raids on border posts in August 2017.
The death toll in Typhoon Mangkhut hit 74, according to Philippine authorities, as rescuers used their bare hands to sift through a massive landslide in which dozens are feared killed in the worst-hit region. Take a look.
Masakit, ma'am, kasi hindi lang mga kamag-anak namin, kami rin mga kasamahan din namin, mga kababayan namin, halos ang nandito. Pag nagtatrabaho nga kami, nandito kami lahat.
Parang wala na nga parang hindi na rescue, retrieval na yun. Dati sa itsura, parang walang nakaligtas.
Now, hundreds of rescuers are using shovels and their bare hands to sift through this massive landslide, with dozens feared dead in the region worst hit by the typhoon. Up to 40 people are still feared buried in the landslide in Itogon, unleashed Saturday as the typhoon stalled over the area and dumped a month's worth of rain in a matter of hours. Because the landslide destroyed roads, authorities have been unable to bring heavy equipment into the area to accelerate the search. As a result, the teams were using human chains to extract debris. The effort has been getting progressively more difficult because the rain-soaked soil has started to harden in the scorching Philippine sun. Crews have been using water to try to soften up the soil. The area was primed for disaster before Mangkhut hit, as it came on the heels of nearly a month of continuous monsoon rains that left the already hazardous area soggy and dangerously loose. Almost all the storm victims were killed in dozens of landslides unleashed along the Cordillera mountain range, a key gold mining area. Now, many of those buried in Itogon were small-scale gold miners and their families who took refuge in a building abandoned by a large mining firm.
Post-Typhoon Ompong or Mangkhut funding requirements can be augmented by a $500 million loan from the World Bank that can be tapped once President Duterte declares a state of calamity. This was announced by Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III during the Philippine economic briefing held at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or in Manila. The finance chief said they recommended this proposal to the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, pending the final assessment of the damage to crops, among others. Dominguez said they cannot determine yet how much would be needed for the measures to help areas damaged by the typhoon over the weekend. And the RRMC has reported that some 218,492 families have been affected by the typhoon.
Meanwhile, the local governments of Cagayan and Ilocos Norte have already declared a state of calamity after the two provinces suffered the brunt of Super Typhoon Ompong or Mangkhut when it landed last Saturday at 2 a.m. Mangkhut made landfall over the town of Bagao, 382 kilometers north of Manila, lashing Cagayan province and nearby areas with maximum winds of 205 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 285 kilometers per hour, the equivalent of a Category 5 intense hurricane in the Atlantic. Now, damage to crops, fisheries, and livestock in Cagayan was estimated at 4.6 billion pesos. This is according to Governor Manuel Namba. The declaration of a state of calamity will speed up the release of funds for recovery and rehabilitation. Meanwhile, damage to agriculture in Ilocos Norte was placed at 1.88 billion pesos and to infrastructure 1.37 billion pesos.
Nigeria has declared a national disaster after severe flooding left about 100 people dead across 10 states, the country's main relief agency said on Tuesday. Heavy seasonal rains have caused the Niger and Benue rivers to burst their banks, inundating communities, farms, and trapping tens of thousands of people in their homes. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari said on Monday he had approved the release of 3 billion naira, or that's $8.3 million, to buy medical and relief materials. Flooding along the river is a frequent occurring during the annual rains, which fall from May to September.
Thank you, sir.
Meanwhile, the death toll from Hurricane Florence rose in the Carolinas as many low-lying neighborhoods remained underwater and a flood warning was issued for others as rivers continued to rise amid pelting rain. A tornado watch was also issued for parts of North and South Carolina as emergency management officials also warned of the potential for dam failures and landslides. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper said there have been 17 confirmed storm-related deaths in North Carolina from Florence. Take a listen.
Catastrophic flooding and tornadoes are still claiming lives and property. My most important message is first. For many parts of North Carolina, the danger is still immediate. Flood waters are rising as rivers crest, and they will for days. As of this morning, North Carolina has 17 confirmed deaths due to this storm. We mourn the loss of each and every life. Please don't make yourself someone who needs to be rescued. Again, stay off the roads in much of the state, especially south of US 64 and east of Interstate 73-74. Many roads in our state are still at risk of floods. Roads you think are safe can be washed away in a matter of minutes.
Meanwhile, CBS News has confirmed that 32 deaths are being attributed to the storm as of Monday evening. That is 25 in North Carolina, 6 in South Carolina, and 1 in Virginia. Among the dead were Leisha Murphy Johnson, 41, and her 7-month-old son, who died when a tree fell on their house in Wilmington, North Carolina. 2 other children who were killed were Caden Lee Welch, who officials say was swept away in rushing waters from Richardson Creek in Union County, North Carolina, and Cade Gills, 3 months, who officials said died when a tree fell on a mobile home in Dallas, North Carolina. More than a dozen rivers across North Carolina were at major flood stage on Monday, U.S. time, or threatening to rise to critical levels. Wilmington, on the banks of the Cape Fear River in North Carolina, was almost completely cut off by land. The National Hurricane Center warned that Florence, which has been downgraded to a tropical depression, continues to dump heavy rain on parts of North Carolina and northeastern South Carolina.
Russia's defense minister warned his Israeli counterpart Tuesday that Moscow could respond to the downing of a Russian plane over Syria as he laid full blame on Israel's Air Force. Sergei Shoigu told Avigdor Lieberman in a phone call that Russia has repeatedly called on Israel to refrain from strikes on Syrian territory which endanger the safety of Russian servicemen. Actions by the Israeli military are not in the spirit of the Russia-Israel partnership, and we reserve the right to future response measures, he said. RT News said on Monday evening 4 Israeli F-16 fighter jets attacked targets in Syria's Latakia after approaching from the Mediterranean. A statement by the Russian Defense Ministry said on Tuesday the Israeli warplanes approached at a low altitude and created a dangerous situation for other aircraft and vessels in the region. The Russian ministry said that the Israelis must have known that the Russian plane was present in the area, but this did not stop them from executing the provocation. Israel also failed to warn Russia about the planned operation in advance. The warning came just a minute before the attack started, which did not leave time to move the Russian plane to a safe area, the statement said. Some remains of the crew members and plane debris have been picked up by the Russian Navy. The incident, which killed 15 Russian servicemen, happened just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed to establish a demilitarized zone around rebel hub Idlib in order to start or stave off a military assault. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told journalists Tuesday that the plane's downing will not have any impact on the agreement.
In a related news, Russia's defense ministry warned Israel that Moscow could respond to the downing of the Russian plane over Syria as it laid full blame on Israel's Air Force. Here's Igor Konachenkov, spokesman of the Russian army. Take a look.
Расцениваем данные провокационные действия Израиля как враждебные. В результате безответственных действий израильских военных погибло 15 российских военнослужащих. Это абсолютно не отвечает духу российско-израильского партнерства. Мы оставляем за собой право на адекватные ответные действия. Бомбометание выполнялось недалеко от места нахождения французского фрегата «Оверн» и в непосредственной близости от заходившего на посадку самолета Ил-20 ВКС России. Прикрываясь российским самолетом, израильские летчики подставили его под огонь средств ПВО Сирии. Израильские средства управления авиацией и летчики F-16 не могли не видеть российский самолет, так как он заходил на посадку с высоты 5 километров. Тем не менее, они преднамеренно пошли на эту провокацию.
A British caver who helped in the dramatic rescue of 12 boys trapped in Thailand earlier this year sued Tesla founder Elon Musk on Monday for calling him a pedo guy and a child rapist. The defamation suit, filed in Los Angeles by Vernon Unsworth, a Briton involved in several cave rescues, follows a highly public spat between the two after Musk traveled to Thailand and offered to assist in rescue efforts. The dispute made headlines in July when Unsworth called Musk's effort to build a mini submarine for the rescue a PR stunt, and Musk responded on Twitter by calling Unsworth a pedo guy or pedophile. Musk apologized days later, but not before his comments were widely condemned, raising concerns over his leadership abilities. But he reignited the dispute in August with an email to BuzzFeed News accusing Unsworth of being a child rapist, marrying a 12-year-old, and engaging in child sex trafficking, the lawsuit alleges. Musk made the series of false statements with actual malice, that is, with actual knowledge of falsity or a reckless disregard for truth or falsity, according to the complaint. Instead of apologizing for his comments, Musk responded with a expletive-laden statement saying, "I hope he sues me," according to the lawsuit. Unsworth is seeking unspecified damages for the worldwide damage he has suffered to his reputation, according to the lawsuit, which noted that a separate complaint was being readied in the High Court of London. Unsworth, who lives part of the year in Thailand, took part in the gargantuan 18-day effort to retrieve the boys and their coach, a mission that ended on July 10 when the last 5 members were extracted. Musk has been the focus of increased scrutiny in recent weeks over erratic behavior, including an online interview in which he was smoking marijuana. Tesla shares have faced pressure and concerns over Musk's stability as the company seeks to ramp up production of its mass-market electric car.
Moving on now, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that the U.S. will reduce the number of refugees admitted to the country to 30,000 in 2019. Now, this marks a historic low and a significant cut from the quota of 45,000 this year and a quota of nearly 85,000 in 2016. Let's listen in.
The United States anticipates processing up to 310,000 refugees and asylum seekers in fiscal year 2019. We propose resettling up to 30,000 refugees under the new refugee ceiling, as well as processing more than 280,000 asylum seekers.
60% or...
Now, the refugee limit had been a source of debate between Trump-appointed officials at the White House and the Department of Homeland Security versus non-political officials at the State Department, who have argued the number should be higher in order to promote diplomacy.
Very foolish policies in our country. We have to end. We really need workers. I mean, with the companies coming in like they're coming in, we need workers. One of the things we'll be doing at the border is we want people to come into our country, but they have to be qualified. They have to be merit-based. I want merit-based people. Right now, 60% over the last 10 years, you take a look, 60% or let's just say, so I get it exactly perfectly, large numbers, a large percentage of the people coming into our country immediately go into welfare or relief, and a lot of times they never work. And we have some very foolish policies in our country. We have to end that. We want people to come into our country. We want them to come in through merit so they can work for all of these massive companies that are coming back, in many cases, coming back to the United States. So thank you very much.
U.S. President Donald Trump stood firmly by his Supreme Court pick, Brett Kavanaugh, Monday after allegations that the conservative judge sexually assaulted a woman when they were teenagers threatened to derail the nomination process. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley canceled a vote on Kavanaugh planned for Thursday and said the nominee and his accuser, California University professor Christine Blasey Ford, would both appear next Monday to testify under oath about the alleged incident. Trump characterized the issue as a little delay and described as ridiculous the suggestion that Kavanaugh might withdraw his candidacy.
Judge Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. At the same time, we want to go through a process. We want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right. I wish the Democrats could have done this a lot sooner because they had this information for many months and they shouldn't have waited till literally the last days. They should have done it a lot sooner. But with all of that being said, we want to go through the process. One thing I will say is that, as I understand it, Judge Kavanaugh spent quite a bit of time with Senator Feinstein, and it wasn't even brought up at that meeting, and she had this information. So you would have thought certainly that she would have brought it up at the meeting, not wait till everything's finished and then have to start a process all over again. But with all of it being said, we want to go through a full process. I have great confidence in the U.S. Senate and in their procedures and what they're doing, and I think that's probably what they're going to do. They'll go through a process and hear everybody out. I think it's important. I believe they think it's important. But again, he is one of the great intellects and one of the finest people that anybody has known. You look at his references, I've never seen anything quite like it. So they'll go through that process.
Eagle News International will be right back.
service, dapat may puso. Siyempre excited! Excited sa bagong experience, excited makatulong. Dapat kapag public service program, approved!
U.S. President Donald Trump defied warnings and escalated the trade confrontation with China, hitting the country with tariffs starting next week on another $200 billion in imports and threatening to target even more if Beijing retaliates. Now, President Trump said China had refused to change the unfair practices that hurt U.S. businesses and workers. For months, we have urged China to change these unfair practices and give fair and reciprocal treatment to American companies, Trump said in a statement. Now, these practices plainly constitute a grave threat to the long-term health and prosperity of the United States economy, he said, but so far China has been unwilling to change its practices, including theft and forced transfer of technology. Once the new round of tariffs takes effect on September 24, punitive duties will be in place on roughly half of the products the U.S. buys from China, its largest source of imported merchandise. The latest round of imports will face 10% tariffs through the end of the year, and then the rate will jump to 25%. In Beijing, China's foreign ministry had already vowed to strike back. If the U.S. launches any new tariff measures, China will have to take countermeasures to firmly ensure our legitimate rights and interests, according to Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang, and he told this to reporters during a regular press briefing on Monday. But Trump warned that if China takes retaliatory action against farmers or other industries, he said we will immediately pursue Phase 3, which is tariffs on approximately $267 billion worth of additional imports. Now, that would mean imposing new taxes on all of the goods the U.S. imports from China. The list slated for tariffs originally included more than 6,000 items, but U.S. officials later removed about 300 types of items, including smartwatches, bicycle helmets, playpens, high chairs, and baby car seats. The changes come after fierce opposition from companies, including global tech giants such as Apple, Dell, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Now, in July, the White House increased charges of $34 billion worth of Chinese products. Then last month, the escalating trade war moved up a gear when the U.S. brought in a 25% tax on a second wave of goods worth $16 billion. This latest round means that around half of all Chinese imports to the U.S. are now subject to the new duties.
We'll see what happens as to whether or not we're able to do something, in particular with China. That's a big one, because the losses have been staggering for so many years for our country, and we just can't let that happen anymore. So we're not going to lose that. We can't do that. We can't do that anymore. It should have been done many years ago. It should have been done by other presidents. And actually, it's a disgrace that it wasn't done. China is now paying us billions of dollars, and we will see how that all works out. I have great respect for President Xi, as you know. I was over there for 2 days with him. I have a lot of respect for China. But last year, we lost $375 billion in deficits.
In Beijing, China's foreign ministry had already vowed to strike back.
中方一再强调，只有在平等、诚信和相互尊重的基础上进行对话协商，才是解决中美经贸问题的唯一的正确途径。但目前美方的所作所为，并没有体现出诚意与善意。我刚才已经说了，针对美方的加征关税的举措，中方将不得不进行反制。至于什么样反制举措，我想 在适当的时候，中方自然会公布。就你刚才提到的一些假设，我想对此我不做评论。
Once the new round of tariffs takes effect on September 24, punitive duties will be in place on $250 billion in goods the U.S. buys from China, its largest source of imported merchandise. The latest round of imports will face 10% tariffs through the year or through the end of the year, and then the rate will jump to 25%. Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said at a regular briefing that China will announce details about its countermeasures at the appropriate time, adding that the protectionist and unilateral measures taken by the U.S. side are very unacceptable for us. The White House says its tariffs are a response to China's unfair trade policies. In theory, the tariffs will make U.S.-made products cheaper than imported ones and so encourage consumers to buy American. The idea is they would boost local businesses and support the national eco.
In other business news, Malacanang welcomed a report released by credit rater Fitch Ratings saying the Philippines maintains a generally favorable growth outlook. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque also lauded the report of McKinsey Global Institute, the business and research arm of McKinsey, citing the country's economy as a very recent accelerator. Take a look.
Good news, we welcome the report of McKinsey Global Institute, the business and research arm of McKinsey, citing the country's economy as a very recent accelerator, end quote. MGI noted that the Philippines' rapid economic growth would make the country an outperformer country in the coming years. It also stated that from 2015 to 2030, the Philippines can grow at an annual rate of 5.3% per annum, which is faster than the 4.1% projected annual average growth rate of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Lastly, MGI mentioned in its report that the growth momentum of the Philippines can be sustained through investments in infrastructure. Further good news, we welcome the Asia-Pacific Sovereign Credit Overview Report released by credit rater Fitch Ratings, citing the Philippines' growth outlook as remaining to be favorable. In its report for the third quarter, Fitch noted that the Philippines economy will sustain its good performance for 2018 on the back of increases in private consumption and investment. Moreover, Fitch Ratings said the country's overall investments will increase due to the steady remittances, growing business processing outsourcing industry, and higher infrastructure spending by the government.
The latest flagship report of the Food and Agriculture Organization known as FAO or FAO focuses on the links between agricultural trade, climate change, and food security. Monday's agriculture commodity markets report points out that by the middle of the century, several factors including higher temperatures, precipitation changes, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events will significantly impact farming and food supplies across the world. Moreover, climate change will affect different places in different ways, with arid and semi-arid regions being exposed to ever lower rainfall and higher temperatures, which will lead to crop losses. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America will be hit the most, many of which already suffer from poverty, food shortages, and malnutrition. FAO Director General Jose Graziano da Silva spelled out in the report that unless we take urgent action to combat climate change, we can expect to see a very different global picture of agriculture in the future.
Unfortunately, the big news are not good news. This is what we can see. We need to say that again, it's the third time for me to announce an increase on the hunger number of people in the world. Now we achieve 821 million people that are considered undernourished in 2017. Really, not only like as conflicts responsible to increase, but the impact of climate change is so powerful nowadays on food that we are stepping behind. We are reversing the positive trends that we have seen along the decade on reducing the nourished people and also providing a better nutrition.
But those of you in the media, you have an obligation to help us get this message out around the world. Because every 5 seconds, a child is dying from starvation. And when there's $300 trillion worth of wealth in the world today, that's unacceptable and it's inexcusable. But climate impact is real. 22 to 23 million people alone were impacted and forcibly displaced because of change in climate.
Are exposed to drastic climatic events.
Eagle News International will be right back.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. A Japanese billionaire and online fashion tycoon, Yusaku Maezawa, will be the first man to fly on a monster SpaceX rocket around the moon as early as 2023. And he plans to bring 6 to 8 artists along.
I choose to go to the moon. Yeah. Finally, I can say I'm very glad to be here. And I'm really exciting and really honored, really appreciate to be able to share this announcement with you.
Yeah. Now, Maezawa, 42, will be the first lunar traveler since the last U.S. Apollo mission in 1972. He paid an unspecified amount of money for the privilege. Maezawa is chief executive of Japan's largest online fashion mall and is the 18th richest person in Japan with a fortune of $3 billion, according to the business magazine Forbes. Meizawa's other hobby is amassing valuable works of modern art, and last year, he announced the acquisition of a Jean-Michel Basquiat masterpiece worth $110.5 million. His love of art led him to decide to invite artists to come along.
French artist Hype has painted a giant land art piece representing a little girl dropping an origami boat into Lake Geneva to support the cause of the NGO SOS Méditerranée, which specializes in the rescue of migrants at sea. The giant painting, covering 5,000 square meters, was produced with biodegradable paints made from natural pigments.
Ici, ça représente une petite fille qui jette un bateau en origami comme un message d'espoir, entre guillemets. Et la figure enfantine, c'est quelque chose de récurrent dans mon travail parce que je pense que c'est les générations futures qui prendront finalement le relais sur nous. Et du coup, c'est important qu'ils soient sensibles, je pense, à ces questions-là. Et puis la petite s'appelle Future, justement, en représentation des générations qui arrivent.
C'est justement parce que c'était poétique qu'on a décidé de s'engager dans ce projet avec Saïd, parce que je trouve beaucoup plus facile, en gros, de pouvoir attraper l'attention des gens quelque part avec une œuvre telle que celle-ci, très poétique, plutôt que de mettre des choses beaucoup plus violentes qui ont tendance à éloigner un peu les gens.
Beautiful. The news continues here on Eagle News International.
Stay with us.
In basketball, it took longer than they wanted, but the Philippines rediscovered their form just in time to bounce back and beat Qatar at home. The visiting Al Anabi started like a house on fire. heavyweight champion Dwayne between the two evenly matched rivals at the T-Mobile Arena 1 year after they had fought to a controversial draw at the same venue. Alvarez inflicted the first defeat of Kazakh slugger Golovkin's career after two judges scored it 115-113 in his favor, with another judge scoring it even at 114-114. Golovkin, who fell to 38-1-1 after the loss, left the ring immediately to get 8 stitches to a cut above his right eye. He later said he believed he had done enough to win and opened the door for a possible third installment. When asked about a third fight, he said under the right conditions, yes. Alvarez's victory ended the 36-year-old's dream of securing a record-breaking 21st consecutive defense of his middleweight titles. While Golovkin appeared to take issue with the result, there was a little sense of controversy about Saturday's outcome. Golovkin's trainer Abel Sanchez was among those who had few complaints. Both fighters fought cagely from the outset, reluctant to trade heavy blows. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
HBO's record-breaking fantasy epic Game of Thrones stormed back onto the Emmy stage, winning the coveted Best Drama Series prize on a night full of surprises, including an on-air marriage proposal that stunned the audience. Take a look.
The Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series.
Emmys organizers were looking for ways to boost declining audience ratings, but they could never have planned for this. One of the winners asked his girlfriend to marry him from the stage as he accepted his award. Glenn Weiss, who took the prize for Best Director of a Variety Special, the Oscars, stunned viewers when he proposed to Jan Svensson, who was sitting in the audience. Watch this.
You wonder why I don't like to call you my girlfriend? Because I want to call you my wife. Will you marry me? Academy. Thank you, everybody. Will you marry me?
That was really surprising.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and
We're one with 25.